Thank you for joining me for the Measuring and Reporting Progress section of ESU 13 Special Education Planning Team's Writing Great IEP series. My name is Pam Brzezinski, and I'll be the presenter for this section today. The materials used for today were developed as part of our Tier 1 IEP facilitation cadre components. Information was brought in from multiple sources, and in addition, we're adding ESU 13 staff's knowledge and expertise to this series. I'm Pam Brzezinski, and I'm the Special Education Director for ESU 13. Prior to this position, I worked in many different schools. As a special education strategist, I worked in a K-5 setting, a 9th, 10th setting, and I worked in a K through 12 special education setting. And so I'm going to bring this information and the ideas from multiple IEP writing and progress report writing to you today to identify the effective ways to write and measure progress in your IEP. We have 5 key learning objectives to explore today. The first is to have you be able to identify the purpose of progress monitoring and to fully understand legally why we do it, and then technically the purpose of it and really why we do it for student support. The second point will be able to help you understand and demonstrate how progress reports and goals and objectives should connect. You may have watched a different section of this series on writing goals and objectives. I'm going to talk a lot today about those because it will connect to your progress reports. They guide our process. We're going to talk about how they connect. The third thing is you should be able to demonstrate the use of effective tools in the progress monitoring process. We're going to talk about ease of use and how to plan for those. A fourth item is to be able to explain the importance of creating a progress monitoring plan. So you have to have a plan and know when you will monitor progress, how you will monitor progress, and when you will get those done by. You will be able to also identify how to look at the next steps based on progress. And so the biggest thing that I will ask of you today is after this section is completed to take a few moments to reflect on how can I change the process that I use to progress monitor. The first component that we'll talk about are the legal elements of progress monitoring. We have 2 key rules to be able to guide us in that. We have to ensure under IDEA that we identify child's progress. How are they making progress? How are they moving through? Are they going to reach their goals? We also have under IDEA the requirement to provide periodic reports. The degree of those and when they are provided is not specifically identified, but you may use quarterly, you may use other periodic reports, but IDEA does state that we have to have periodic reporting to parents and team members on how progress is being made. We also have Rule 51, which mirrors IDEA to a great extent. It requires us to have a description of how the progress toward meeting the annual goal will take place, when it will be measured, and what periodic reporting will take place. So again, you may use quarterly periodic reports concurrent with other issuance of report cards, or however your school may do this. But the key thing we have to remember when we talk about the purpose for progress monitoring is that it is a type of formative assessment. And going back to your educational background, when you think about formative assessment, your whole goal is to see how students are doing over a period of time. And I really like this visual that I'm presenting you today because we have to look at achievement from a process perspective. We have to look at the elements of the disability, which is the IEP writing process and several sections of this series. Then we have to develop strong goals and objectives in order to guide us. We put services into place, and many of your sections in this series cover that. But then we have to analyze the progress. And it's just like any other process. If we don't know why we're doing it or we don't have a purpose for it, then it's null and void. So I want you to think of progress monitoring today on a different purpose. And the whole thing is to kind of almost check yourself. And that is where I used progress monitoring as my assessment. Did I help the student grow? Did I help the student achieve their goals through the interventions and measurement that I have? So really, when we look at progress monitoring, we want to connect it to a type of formative assessment that is guiding us towards providing the education for our students. We need to list the ongoing process and growth of collecting and analyzing data to determine the progress. So we have to make sure that we are analyzing, and that analysis is going to be critical. So not only do we collect the data, but we also have to analyze it in order to make sure that our students are making progress. So progress monitoring is more than just completing that, crossing that T, dotting that I. It's about making sure that we have the growth that we feel is necessary and sufficient for our students. And there's a whole nother component of why we measure progress. Because it's the law, we have to get that out of the way. We have to make sure that sufficient and adequate progress is made towards a goal. There is no other way to do that than providing a progress report. So the progress report may come after our IEP is written, but we really have to make sure that that is a vital part of our IEP writing process. The way we write it, the way we plan it, the way we do everything follows Andrew F. by changing progress of a de minimis status to one that is reasonably calculated to enable a child to make progress appropriate in light of the child's circumstances. So we have to prove that our goals, our IEP is reasonably calculated to make sure that the student is going to make progress. We cannot do that in the education process if we don't provide a progress report. So progress reports serve a very important purpose in the IEP process. And really, they are our measurement. And so we have to make sure that we are providing more than just de minimis. So when our student is only growing 2 fluency words per minute, and we have a goal that they're going to grow 70 words per minute over a period of a year, and the growth was 2 words a minute over a quarter, that is de minimis. And we want to make sure that we adjust our process and our educational implementation to reflect that we need further growth. So it's also, like I said, it's kind of a check on ourselves of seeing, are we providing the best educational opportunity for our students that we possibly can provide? And the final thing that I want to talk about of why we progress monitor is that it guides our decision making. We base our decisions for our students on curriculums, assessment data, diagnostic ability, and our instinct. And we never know that the goals we set, the curriculum that we implement, is going to have that impact that we hope it has on our students. And the key reason for that is that every student is unique. And so we cannot come into progress monitoring or the IEP writing process as a cookie cutter approach. We have to make sure that it's individualized and that our goals are individualized. Therefore, our progress monitoring will be individualized. And it will guide us to know if we need to make different decisions, if we need to reconvene an IEP team meeting to re-look at our goals, to look at our decisions that were made, our accommodations, our modifications. Progress monitoring can guide the future steps in our IEP process. When we think about this, we have to think about 4 key things. The first is that we must have continuity with goals and objectives. I mentioned that I would come back to goals and objectives because they really are the key to strong progress monitoring. And you hopefully have watched the section on writing strong goals and objectives. If you have not, I highly recommend it. If we have really well-written goals that include all of the components, it makes our life easier for progress monitoring. A second thing we're going to explore is selecting our data measurement tools and continuing that measurement. How do we identify how we're going to measure? That technically should come from our goals and objectives, but we also have to sit and think about that. We also have to create a plan for reporting progress and identifying the time frame and the method of which that will be done. And a final thing that I will offer to you is that we must identify what our level of sufficient progress is, and that if our student is on track to meet it. And I think this is the step today that really might be the biggest aha moment is that often we don't put the analysis, we may do the analysis, but we don't put it into the IEP. So we're going to talk about making sure that all of those components are met when you are writing the progress reports and doing progress monitoring for your IEP. But I want you to keep in mind you need to make it easy on yourself, because when you have multiple students, it can be very difficult to make sure that this process is done well. So first, I want to encourage you to determine what your data collection tool would be and keep that consistent, and make sure that you know what you're measuring so that you have the right tool for it. A second thing is to keep data that relates directly to your goals. Often, some of us might come to the end of the quarter and we think, oh, I've been collecting data on this, but the goal really needs it on this. So you have to really evaluate your goals to determine what type of progress monitoring you need to complete. You need to create goal sheets or methods to track that data, because if you have those things right by you, progress reports will be easy to write because you will have that data. The more data you include, it becomes way easier to write your progress report. You need to review your data weekly or monthly based on your need. That's going to be written within your goal, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the future. Then analyze it for trends to make sure that we are providing the best education possible for students. The first thing that I want to explore with you is the continuity with the starting level, the goals and objectives. I have two key elements to offer you to make sure that you expand on the information you received from the goals and objectives section. First, make sure you collect baseline data. If you have baseline data, then it becomes very easy to show the progress within your progress report. You have to determine the current level of their performance so that when you've administered your probes during a week, or you've administered your probes on a bi-weekly method, whatever method you've chosen, you would be able to say, after administration in a 3-week setting, growth has occurred from this point to this point. Progress reports are only good if someone knows where they start. So collecting your baseline data and knowing where you're going to start is important. That is also important in putting that in your goals and objectives. The more specific we are, the easier it is to write progress reports. We also have to identify the goal. We have to know exactly what we're measuring. So reading the goal is very critical. If it is a word identification fluency goal, then we're going to measure fluency. So in the example I give you, the benchmark is 40 words correct per minute by the end of first grade. So we would say, if the benchmark is 40, we should be showing growth that would allow us to get to 40 over the time frame that we have that IEP written for. If we're not making sufficient progress, then we may need to revisit it. So that's where having that continuity with your goals and objectives is very critical for you to be able to write strong progress reports. There should be a link, in addition, between the wording in the goals and objectives and what language needs to be used in the progress report. We have to be consistent with our goals. So that's where I say the continuity between the goals and the objectives has to be there. We have to make sure that if we're using percents as the student goal measurement, then we must report that progress in percents. We should not change it. So if an example is if we have, so the student will achieve this in 4 of 5 trials, that's technically 80% as a goal. But we've offered it in the goal of 4 or 5 trials. So we should be backing it down to the exact same wording, even if we know that they've achieved 80%. We wouldn't use a percentage if we use that wording. If we say we'll have a turn-in rate of 90%, then we want to make sure that we're reporting progress on the percentage of turn-in. If we say we'll have a reduction in office referrals, we should use the exact wording when we write that progress report. We want to keep everything consistent so that we show that we are truly tying it into the goal that has been set and monitoring the same thing. So an example of linking wordage. given his assignment turn in, so the goal is given his assignment turn in his mathematics class, Doug will turn in his assignments on the required due date noted through gradebook, demonstrating improvement from a 59% turn-in rate to one of 90%. So in this example, we're going from 59% to 90%. The first thing we have to key in on is that we used a percentage. In addition, we also talked about a turn-in, assignment turn-in, and we talked about using gradebook. So we're going to take some elements of that to make sure that we link our progress report very clearly to the goal. So the example progress report comment might be Doug is improving on turning in his math assignments on the required due date. So we've analyzed it and we said there is improvement. This quarter, Doug increased his turn-in rates during the second quarter from an end of the first quarter rate of 65% to an end of the second quarter rate of 73%. You'll notice that we used percentages to report this. In addition, what we noted in there is the time frame that we were doing this. So in the IEP, we're going to have 4 quarters of processing or progress reporting most of the time. So in this case, we offered that he had grown from the first to the second to 65% as the new baseline for the second quarter. Then we set that and moved up to 73%. Then we link it even further because we bring it back to the goal by saying if Doug's progress continues at this rate, I would expect him to meet this goal by the end of the fourth quarter. Because we have analyzed it and identified that he is showing sufficient growth. So we're keeping on track with the goal. And it shows the linking wordage with the goal because we continually come back to everything that was in the original goal. So once we have that in place and we understand that, we have to make sure that we have a data collection method that had been there to determine that baseline, but also to monitor it over time. Because if we are not monitoring over time, we cannot write strong progress reports. So the IEP teams have to consider what unit of measurement they're going to use to determine that baseline and growth. We have to make sure that we have that baseline and the goal criterion to determine if we've made progress. We can't do that if we don't have those measurements. That should be noted also in the present level, and it should be noted within the goals. So we have to remember that the IEP is a connected system of all of these components. So one of the things we wanted to talk about is keeping that wording the same. So in the first example, I wanted to show you how we have that data collection method and talking about what we're doing over what time frame. So in the first example, we have in tri-weekly reading fluency probes. So right there, we've identified that in tri-weekly reading fluency probes, this is how we got our information. Pam has demonstrated a growth from 15 words per minute to 44 words per minute over the quarter. So we have a time frame that we have collected this, and we have data collection points that we have noted. Then we have identified that back to the goal, we link it back to the goal where we were monitoring fluency. So we identified words per minute because that's what's noted in the goal. And then we add the analysis part. If Pam continues this growth trend, she will meet sufficient progress towards her overall reading fluency goal. So notice I brought it back to the goal. I linked it back to the reading fluency goal so that the parent or the team members when reading it would know. Pam has demonstrated a reduction in the number of office referrals this quarter from 8 to 2. So we know that we're looking quarterly at the total number of office referrals. We provide a number because that's what's in the goal. As of this reporting period, Pam has met her goal. So sometimes we have students who have met their goal, but what we've identified going further, because we're saying we're not going to meet because further monitoring will need to take place to ensure that maintenance of this goal is in place, because we know number of office referrals and behavior may change over time. So we have to make sure that we are very clear on how we collected that data, how we monitored it, what period and time frame we monitored it, and if they're going to meet it. It's always bringing it back to the goal. Things to consider when you're doing this, really think about from the very beginning, going back to that goal setting training, Determine what type of data will be collected. How are you collecting it? And this isn't a data collection presentation, but I just want you to think about are you going to measure frequency? Are you going to measure percentage? Are you going to measure duration? Are you going to measure quality, level of assistance? How are you measuring this? Knowing what you're measuring is going to make your progress monitoring that much stronger. Determine where the data will be collected. Are you going to do this in the classroom, cafeteria, playground, job site? Knowing where you're going to do this is going to be very helpful to setting those goals. Determine how often evidence will be collected. Notice in the previous examples I talked about in tri-weekly reading fluency probes so that I could set goals for myself to make sure that this is what we were doing. We noticed that we are monitoring the number of office referrals over the quarter. It helps me to know what I am monitoring, how I'm going to monitor it, and how often. Who will collect that information? Who's going to collect that? That doesn't necessarily need to be written in progress monitoring, but if we don't know who's going to collect it, we could come to the very end of our quarter and have to write our progress monitoring reports and have absolutely no information because we thought somebody else was doing that. So I just want to bring that to your attention of making sure you know who is going to collect the information. Also, check with the team. What are the parent, the student, and the other team member perceptions of data collection and reporting? How is everybody feeling about this? Is this the best method that we're going to go forward? Because if we provide progress that doesn't mean anything to anyone, it isn't helpful. And we spend a lot of time writing these reports, so we want to make sure that we're doing that. So knowing all of those about timeframes and about how is very critical in moving forward. But I also want you to remember that you need to select a tool that's easy to implement because, and especially if you are working with others in the school, how are you going to get that around? Is that a Google implementation you're going to be doing? Is it some method that you would easily be able to do? Is this quick to administer? Are you able to make sure that you can do this efficiently, effectively? And if I'm doing tri-weekly fluencies, do I have the time to be doing that? If they're 5-minute fluencies, if they're 1-minute fluencies, I have the time to do that. Is it cost effective? Are we going to be able to get that in there? Can it be administered frequently? Is it a method that if I had to increase the monitoring, I could do? If I wasn't seeing progress, a lot of progress over time, maybe there's an up and down trend. Do I need to increase that? So think about those things. Am I sensitive to change in the child's performance? Are we really looking at that? Did they have a really huge increase, but all of a sudden they're there? Should we write that into the progress report if that happened? Absolutely. Knowing your data over time is going to help you write a better progress report because maybe the student only grew 10 words a minute, but they showed a significant regression mid-quarter. That could identify something we need to talk about. So knowing that and writing it in there could alert other members on the team that something else is going on and we might need to look. Is it used to evaluate progress for physical, cognitive, academic, social, emotional? Is this going to help us? As I stated before, our purpose for progress monitoring is really a self-check and seeing if we did the right planning. Did we do that? And if it is not going to help us know that, we need to maybe consider a different method of collection. And after we have that, we want to clearly identify when progress will be monitored and reported. So as I said before, it is very important that we explain in the IEP during the goal setting process when we come to that point of when will progress be reported. A lot of people take a copy and pasted response, but sometimes we may want to even add in there that maybe if major changes have occurred, the special education teacher will reach out to team members. Because someone may say, I'm not sure that that's going to work. So we want to make sure that if we have those discussions that we write that down. We also want to clearly note that monitoring will take place. And that's why in the examples that I provided you, you'll notice that I said, an analysis of the information identifies that Pam will reach her goal by the end of the IEP cycle. That's important to note because we're saying, I'm really monitoring this, I'm on the ball with this, and I'm really clearly helping out. Remember that we have to make sure that it is done frequently and regularly, because if we only do a one moment in time snapshot, we're not getting a good picture of whether that progress is truly there, if it's progress, or if the regression is there. We're not getting that it's truly regression. So an example I have is progress will be monitored by the special education teacher weekly and reported when the general education students receive their report cards on a quarterly basis. I used to take my binders, I used to have data binders, and I would take all of my data binders and I would look about every other week and I would look at the progress. And so I would write in mine, progress will be monitored by the special education teacher every other week and reported to general education students when they receive their report cards. So I would write that in there because that meant that I was doing the monitoring. I was being very clear about what my goals were. The key points to help you out for IEP writing and progress monitoring: don't bundle them up so that at the end of the year, you have 4 progress reports to complete in 2 months. Number one, IDEA and Rule 51 identify that this should be done on periodic reports. So number one, we wouldn't be meeting the legal component. So make sure that you're doing your progress reports as close to the date as you have put in the IEP. Just put it on your calendar, plan for it, know that you have to do this, because you do have to do those based on the periodic reporting schedule that you have identified in the IEP. It would be very good after this training to review that in your IEPs so that you know when you've said you're going to report it. IEPs also need to be finalized for this to occur on time. So there may be many other service providers that have to add in progress reports because they collect the data and they need to enter that. But if we haven't finalized an IEP that took place 4 weeks ago, then no one can enter that information. So we have to make sure to be mindful that we finalize our IEPs so that we can put progress monitoring reports in there. That's a very important point for everyone to take consideration of. And if we address and identify sufficient progress according to the team, so we're supposed to be analyzing this process. We're supposed to know, is this goal going to bring sufficient progress to this child? What we want to really think about in the progress monitoring IEP writing process is that we want to make sure that we address that we are looking at that component, because that's really what it is all about. So we need a statement about the extent to which progress is sufficient for the student to meet the goal by the end of the year. And if we're writing that progress is not sufficient and the student won't reach the goal, we absolutely need to have either another meeting, or we need to talk to team members and talk to parents about discussing a change of a goal. Because if we can't meet that and we're seeing that, we might need further supports. We might need an intervention change. We might need a goal change, an objective change. We might need to add different objectives. Maybe we learned a lot about the student in that process. When you specifically focus on this portion, you will see how it will guide you in this process. So if the student continues making progress at the rate, they will meet their goal by the end of the IEP date. And you have, remember how we go way back to that, we never know. We go off of instinct and we try to plan based on all the other data we have. So we never know that it's going to be impactful. So what I want to encourage you to do is to make sure that you put a statement in there, because then you check yourself that you are actually looking at that component. So examples, if the student is meeting progress, we could say Pam continues making progress at the current rate. It is expected that she will meet this goal by the end of the year. If we are not making sufficient progress, we say Pam has not increased her progress on this goal. It is unlikely that she will meet her goal by the end of the year. Team members may need to meet and discuss this. So that's where we have to really show that we are truly using this to guide our planning process and our instructional processes. The biggest thing about progress monitoring that I hope I can instill today is that it's a continuous process. It's not a one-time activity. It's not we're just going to do this at the end of the quarter and never look at this again. Progress monitoring is critical, as I said in the very beginning, to our IEP process. It really is the checker, that formative assessment of if our IEP is working. That is why IDEA and Rule 51 have included that we should have periodic reports because it's a continuous process and it helps us know if we need to make changes. Our students need us to analyze this and know that what we're doing is impactful in their time. And they spend a lot of time with us and a lot of time in instructional and remediation. And we want to make sure that we are doing what is right. And so following a strong progress monitoring system and writing it within the IEP is very helpful for them to know that their time is well spent. So I appreciate your time today. I'm giving you a few references that I have used in this presentation today. And then also I would like to offer you the opportunity to receive professional development credit through professional learning at ESU 13. In order to do that, you would complete the following Google form with your name, district, and information, and then that will be shared with our professional learning department so that that is recorded that you have attended this training. If you have any questions or need any more information or examples or support on progress monitoring, please reach out to me at ESU 13. Thank you so much and have a super day.